Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Robert Hannon, and it's my pleasure tonight to be talking with Stan Justice. And I have a few announcements. Many of you who've been here throughout the summer will know my first one is if you have a cell phone and it can be put in plane mode or silence, that would be terrific. And then I often announce what else is taking place this week, because tomorrow night on the Healthy Living series here in this venue, Scott Looper will be exploring how to starve cancer. Just don't invite it over for dinner is my solution. But then on Wednesday, Discover Alaska will have Associate Professor Chris Common, who will look at the Northern Dene astronomy. Thursday at the Borgeson is the Red Hackle Pipe Band at 6, and then at 7:30, Ice Jam will be performing. Lots of great things. Next week at this time, I'll have Nikki Eisman, and then the following week, that's not on the program that you may have, Michelle is having Dermot Cole and Dan O'Neill talk to each other about their books, and about Dan has a new book out now, and so they'll be here, but they'll be in Scheibel Auditorium and starting at 7 o'clock. So that's something to look forward to. UAF acknowledges the Alaska Native Nations upon whose ancestral lands our campuses reside. The Trothyada campus is located on the ancestral lands of the Dene people of the lower Tanana River. And let me introduce Stan. Born in Colorado, raised by a family of hikers, he says, Stan Justice exercised his adventurous spirit by climbing mountains, hiking wilderness trails, and running and biking competitively. He studied civil engineering, graduating from Colorado University. Work brought him to Alaska, where he learned about and graduated from UAF's environmental engineering program. Currently, he dedicates his time to enhancing recreational trails in Fairbanks, Alaska, by constructing, maintaining, and advocating for trails. His commitment to preserving the natural world is expressed in his active involvement with local organizations that promote environmental conservation and community engagement. In 2024, he helped found Fairbanks Trails Incorporated, a 501c3 nonprofit, where when he's not working on trails, Stan enjoys dancing with his partner, Barb Lorz. Welcome, Stan Justice. Okay, Stan, I always like to begin where you were born and raised. So tell me about Colorado. You say a family of hikers.
Right. It's actually born in a cow town, Brush, Colorado, and we bounced around a little, ended up in South Denver, and my parents were hikers, and so all us four boys all became hikers. So
Holy smokes. Yeah. So 4 boys in the family.
4 boys, yes.
Where were you in the birth order?
I was number 2.
Number 2. Okay. Right. And a little rambunctious, was it?
I can't believe my parents survived. So.
That's right. All right. But now when you say you hiked all over the place, where would you hike?
Well, a lot in Colorado. We'd load up the car and head out to the mountains and climb little peaks and whatnot. Ended up going to the Grand Canyon a couple times and
wow.
Hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back.
But you also you pointed like a stream or a creek in the neighborhood. You had opportunities to explore around there too.
Right, we were total free range kids. A lot of people, I'm sure, know the meaning of that, where you had parks, and so one direction we had this park that had a lake, and it wasn't very well developed. It was just an old ag storage lake that we could go play around up there. In the other direction, a block away, was this creek, that would sometimes flood and sometimes be small, and there were fish in it, and these little cliffs that were, probably only like 6 feet tall. But we had lots of lots to play with. So we'd just be gone all day, and we just knew we had to be. Lunch and dinner was the two.
So that survival instinct was honed in early.
Get
Okay. Well,
fed.
all right. So, but I want you to tell me about the Junior Colorado Mountain Club, because talk about
Right.
free range kids.
Right. It was a program that was part of the Colorado Mountain Club, and it was 1930 it started. So it was like before I was even born. I was born in '49, and so this club had been going on for years. And what it was high school age kids that would organize these trips. We had a little democracy. We'd elect officers, and we'd have meetings and whatnot. And it was just us kids that were doing it, and we'd put out a schedule and put on these trips. And the only caveat is we had to have one older person along. It was called a sponsor when we'd go abroad, go out in the mountains and stuff. But a lot of those sponsors were just kids that had turned 21. Which just meant they'd buy the beer, So we'd borrow the keys to the family car and pack it full of kids, and we'd go off and climb some 14,000-foot peak, and we didn't kill anybody, It was, I don't know how we did it, but it was like, phew.
Yeah. Well,
And it was mixed gender too. It was coming from a family of 4 boys. I knew nothing about girls, and so suddenly we were thrust into this situation where they were there, and we had to figure it out. So.
Well, going a little farther along that route, let's see. Now, rock walls are pretty common. We have a couple here at UAF. But in those days, did you have rock walls, or did you learn by climbing?
Well, our rock walls were trees. It was these big cottonwood trees that had this bark that you could kind of get a hold of, and you get toe holes in it, and so those were our city walls, and we'd climb on those.
And you'd practice on those?
We'd practice on climbing trees.
Wow.
And so that's how we started, and then we had a class in rock climbing, and so we learned some more about how to tie in. And the first time we tied in, this guy had a leather belt. We just tied to the leather belt, but we learned that we needed to do a bowline, and then a bowline on a coil around your waist. There were no harnesses at that point, and no helmets. So it was crude by today's standards.
Yeah. Well, but speaking of climbing walls, don't you have a climbing wall at your place?
I do. It's four sheets of plywood on the back of the house, and it's hinged so that you can adjust the amount of overhang. And it's kind of modeled after a climb out at Angel Rocks called "There's Got to Be a Way." It's got this certain crack, and so I tried to replicate that crack in that wall. But it sits there and nobody uses it. Come on by if anyone wants to climb on the wall.
I was going to say, a lot of people build ships and bottles. They don't climb on their... all right, but talking about climbing, you have also penned a couple of books about climbing. One of them is right there.
Yeah.
And I have to ask you, does writing come naturally to you? How did those come about?
Well, I think the reason I went into engineering was that you didn't have to know how to spell, But then spell checker came along, and you still didn't have to know how to spell.
That's right. But putting together a book is no small matter.
Yeah, initially it was supposed to be this other person had started the project, and he was taking all these pictures, and I was just going to kind of help him. And next thing I know, he's dropped out, and I'm working on it and working on it and working on it. So I finally put it out. It was just Xerox sheets, half dozen pages or something. I'd circulate it around, get comments back, and it's now that the rock climbing guide is now in its like 8th edition or something. And Frank Olive has taken it over, and even Frank Olive is ready to pass it on to somebody else now. So because I've stopped rock climbing, so I'm not so involved there, and but it still survives. It's available at Beaver Sports and REI. So.
Do any climbs stand out for you?
Well, Foraker was, I went on to mountaineering, and that's what this book's all about, is the Delta Range, go past Delta, you go into the mountains there, and there's glaciers up there, and it's our mountaineering playground where ski mountaineers would go and train down there. And so I'd done a lot of trips to there. So I started working on this book, and finally got it out. And I think it's like 4th edition now, and I keep adding to it. And it's useful for non-mountaineers too, because there's a section on access. So it talks about getting up the Canwell Glacier, the Fells Glacier, the ridge between the Fells and the Canwell. It's got all these access routes that are useful to know about. So,
I want to now go back to your brothers, because I understand you followed your older brother into track in high school. So, and you were a standout there, especially at that state meet. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was on the team, and my brother quickly got out of running, but I took to it and was on the track team for my 4 years in high school. And then my senior year, we had a superb team, and we thought we were going to take state. So the gun goes off, and we all take off, and somewhat for whatever reason, my other runners they're not making it, and so I kind of got somehow excited. I don't know, something happened, and I just started sprinting way too early, and I kept passing people and passing people and passing people. End up in 4th place, and that got me a meeting with Frank Potts, who was the coach of CU, and he looks at my record and say, "It looks like you only had one good race." But I promised to work hard, and so he gave me a scholarship and got me a job cooking and washing dishes at the student union. And so I spent 4 years on the CU track team and the cross country team, and I never did all that well, but I got to go to nationals twice, and it was great training. I learned how to train. So.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about the equinox probably later, but it paid off. I'm just guessing. And that was the restaurant work, right? That really did that for you.
Really.
Oh, okay. So, but at this time, when you go to Colorado University, you become an engineer.
Yes.
And you told me that you'd always been fascinated with tinkering with stuff, and you blew a few fuses in your home.
Yes.
Where did that come from, Stan? That fascination?
I don't know. I did have an uncle, so that's an electrical engineer, so it could have been that planted the seeds. But we just had we had a basement, and so there was a little shop down there with some tools, and I always liked to try and fix things, and so my parents just knew they was going to screw in fuses, and they always kept a lot of them on hand because I didn't know enough. I guess I knew enough not to get shocked, but I certainly blew some fuses. So.
But you were fearless about opening them up and trying to figure out what was wrong, right?
What's wrong with this old record player, and I plug it in and boom.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay, so you study engineering, civil engineering, right?
Right, civil. Right.
And what is civil engineering?
Well, civil includes structural and sanitary engineering, or environmental engineering as it became. When the environmental movement happened, they took the word sanitary off and replaced it with environmental. But I was actually a structural engineer is what I mostly studied there in CU.
And it was through summer work during your college years that you first came to Alaska?
Right. There's no internet back then, so it was bulletin boards, and there in the CU bulletin board was survey aid, Southeast Alaska, U.S. Forest Service. So I applied, and I started going to the Forest Service and working summers up there as a surveyor. And then at the end of, once I was out of college, I went back to work full-time for the Forest Service, but I just knew I was not going to build logging roads for the rest of my life. So there on the bulletin board was environmental engineering master's degree in Fairbanks, Alaska. And so I signed up and came up and got my degree, and then ended up that my professor got me hooked up with the Department of Environmental Conservation, and so I worked for them for 20 years and turned 50 and called it quits. So,
Well, now, but environmental engineering, as you point out, covers a broad swath of things. What did you happen to focus on?
well, I ended up in potable water mostly.
Okay.
But that was back in the day when there were cubicles, and so you heard everything else. So I learned a lot about air pollution over here, and oil spills, the guy over this cubicle, and wastewater for another cubicle. But I was mostly focused on the potable water. It's a federal program. They've got money to run this drinking water program, and I did the northern part of the state.
Well, let's get you, when you retire, you don't slow down at all. You start working for and with a number of organizations. Northern Alaska Environmental Center is one of them.
Right.
Yeah. So would you be able to put all this engineering expertise to work there?
Oh, probably not specifically, but I think in part it really helped, and there were lots of other people involved. Bill Holman was my right-hand person when we remodeled the environmental center, and then someone had the idea, let's put 4 inches of foam on the outside of this entire building. Carl Manetti, and so we went to work, and it dug down 4 feet around the entire building and put 4 inches of foam, wrapped that entire building with 4 inches of foam, and then put stucco on it. And Carl didn't like ladders and was kind of a big guy, and so he'd send me up with the insulation blower in the attic. So the insulation in that attic was like, we just filled it up, So, and the energy cost of that building just plummeted, that building takes nothing to heat anymore.
Well, mentioning Bill and Kramer's Field, you were involved in the expansion, weren't you? Tell me about that.
Right. It's much later that the Conservation Fund, a great organization, and they have an active program in Alaska to find parcels to purchase and put them into parks. And the UA has lands, wetlands out there around Kramer's Field, and we've added 2 large parcels there, and they needed some match, and so I plunked down money to buy 50 acres, and that became matched for the 400 acres that were then added to the refuge.
Wow. And
now we're working on the Northwest Peak property. That we really want to get that into the refuge because it's actually got ducks, It's be great habitat for, and Great Northwest is pulling out, so we're actively advocating for at least some of that property to go into the refuge.
That's amazing. Well, let's turn to trails because I know you're passionate about them. Where did that, you had trails in Colorado. Why are you so passionate about trails?
Well, I think, all my hiking and my running and was on trails for the most part. And so here I felt like I was using the fruits of somebody else's labor. Someone else had built all these trails. Some of them were mining trails or whatnot. And so once I turned 50, I was looking for something to do. And I said, well, I'm going to try and give back to the community and work on trails. And so that's what I started doing when I was able to retire at the age of 50. I was still healthy and could work on trails. And so that's kind of where it all started.
So I want to walk you through a little bit of that because I know nothing about building a trail or maintaining a trail or having the resources to keep trails open and safe. So talk me through that. What do you do when you want to put in a trail?
There's not a lot of new trails going in, really. These are basically old trails. It was like Jenny Wood and Celia Hunter, they were the one that put in the Scarland. with so we're just it had to get rerouted because it didn't necessarily be in the easement, but
Yeah.
there haven't been a lot of new trails built, so it's basically upgrading or repairing or brushing. That's the main thing our trails need is brushing, cutting the brush. And there's a lot of people that work on that. I'm sure a lot of people here have loppers or chainsaws, and if a tree falls across the Scarland, it does make a noise, and somebody goes out and saws it out of there. So I mean, it's just we're just so lucky in Fairbanks that you look at any other community, and they'll have trails for sure, but they're inside a park. They're inside a unit of some kind of a parkland or Forest Service lands or something, and you generally have to drive to that trail to get on it. But as you know, the trails are in a lot of our backyard, and they go through the subdivisions. When the borough was looking for an example of another community, they couldn't really find anything like Fairbanks, where the trails go right through the subdivisions, and we've got this code in the subdivision that requires an easement when a subdivision goes in for the Class B trails. It's just we're really lucky to have that. So.
Well, so you have this passion. Were there mentors on how to care and maintain trails that you worked with?
Right. I ran into Jeffrey Orth, John Underwood, Eric Troyer, lots of different people that had really studied trails and have just learned through the years from them.
Yeah. Well, and it's remarkable. I think I read a document by Jane Parrish, I think.
Right.
Yeah, she did it, where there is a rich history of trails in Fairbanks, but you have to know where to look.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you know how to maintain them, but I've seen you put in a trail. In fact, UAF has benefited from that. We have the Whizzies,
right.
But they were set away from Smith Lake. But you put in a wonderful trail that kind of goes directly to Smith Lake.
Yeah, I was somewhat involved with that one.
Yeah.
I mean, the one I really put in was the Himalaya Trail. Anyone been on the Himalaya Trail?
Sure.
Well, I went out. Actually, like 4 different people. Nat Goodhue had tried to put that trail in when he was at CU like 40 years ago. And Alan Doyle tried to put that trail in, about 20 years ago, and got shut down. And so I just went out with a chainsaw and all this noisy equipment, and I put that trail in, and up above, Yukon Drive was going on, and they just assumed it was someone down by Patty Center, and the Patty Center assumed it was someone else. And the trail I put in was only, just like a foot wide, but it was engineered, designed to go into the gullies and whatnot. And then along came this consultant that found that trail and said, "Wow, that thing is so cool. It should be the #1 priority to expand it." so suddenly the university goes out with a little dozer, and they make it into the 4-foot wide trail it is now. But I was the one that put that in. But as soon as I put it in, I couldn't go back because it got so busy. I mean, it just had traffic down it, so it's like I couldn't go back and do much with it. So,
yeah, we've walked it. Yeah, it's a whole new meaning to trailblazing when you really describe it like that. Go forth and trail, Greg. Yeah. Being on the UAF trails a number of times, I would see you doing work there frequently.
Yes.
You would find sections that needed more covering.
Right. I started doing those chip trails, which in retrospect, I should have used gravel from the very start, but skiers can't stand the thought of gravel on ski trails. So I started using these wood chips, and everyone said, "Oh, they'll only last 2 years." Well, they actually lasted like 10 years, and you can't keep adding more chips. And the university has kind of taken that on to they get chips and add them sometimes. But it's I was just out to make a 6-mile loop that was we could do it without getting your feet wet, with running shoes on. And it's pretty much, it's held together fairly well.
It's part of the Equinox Trail.
Bits of it, right.
Bits
the first
of it,
part
yeah.
is part of the Equinox.
Yeah. And also, you mentioned Scarlin. There are other trails that you still maintain.
Yeah, the Equinox, and then the winter trails, the Rat Ponds Trail, the
Yeah, I
golf
want to
course
talk about
trails,
that. I
and-
mean, for Nordic skiers, you did a great service. You opened up that. You did check with the golf course before.
Well,
you
actually-
right? Hold on. I want to make sure before I say anything. That's okay.
Well, the way golf course came down is that Howie Thies had a bar that was a summer bar that was attached to the golf course, and he wanted to make the bar go through the winter, but his liquor license required a recreation, and so he decided that his recreation in the winter was going to be a ski area, and Howie and I were. I guess we could even say enemies. We were certainly not friends, because he was the Arctic Man. He was the guy that started Arctic Man, and I'd written some letters to the editor that were against the Arctic Man. And so we were not friends. So I was a little nervous about going to him, but he groomed this loop in the golf course, the skate loop. And so I finally, after a couple of years, got my nerve up and said, Howie, would you mind if I put classic tracks around the outside? And he said, oh, I'd love to have you do that. He never groomed again. I just took over, And now he's a friend, It's just like, life is strange, It's just weird that your enemies become your friends and your friends become your enemies. And it's just,
We should all be so lucky. Okay, but I have to ask you then the rat ponds, that's another component, and those are part of the dog mushing trails, right?
Well, we use the dog mushing trails where we have to, but
Right.
I was trying to get off the dog mushing trails, and I wanted to go through the rat ponds, and that was just the only thing I could come up with was to use some of the mushing trails, and they don't like set tracks in the mushing trails, so I can't put tracks there. But I started putting it in that loop, and it became instantly popular. It gets
Yeah, it's great.
it gets overused actually because the tracks don't last. People walk their dogs on it, and it kind of gets taken out pretty quickly anymore. But it's still very popular. So
Yeah, well, obviously so popular that people walk their dogs on it. Yeah. But then this raises an important point because while you put down the gravel or the chips or whatever in the summer, but in the winter you have to have a drag or set those tracks with a special thing. Did you build those?
Yes,
components?
the first ones were using my crude carpentry skills. I'd make them out of wood, and they would break, and I'd put them back together, and they would break. And so eventually, I learned how to weld. I got the little MIG welder that has this wire spool that feeds this wire out this nozzle, and I got all the safety equipment, and basically taught myself how to stick steel together. And then Howie was the KFR tower was 180 feet or whatever it was up there, and he had no customers on it, and so one day he just pulled it down. He just sawed off the bolts and the big rope, and he just pulled it down. So I asked him if I could have some of the steel, and he said, "Sure, go ahead." And so I was out there with my ladder taking these bolts out and getting this knife. And he bent a lot of the steel. He was trying to fold it up with the loader, which didn't work at all. It just made a mess. And but I did get quite a bit of steel out of it. It's all galvanized steel, probably lead paint, but I built all this grooming equipment using that steel. And
Did you have a pattern that you worked from?
no, I've been looking at grooming equipment for years. I've
Sure.
gone to Colorado, and I always go over to the grooming, where the grooming stuff is parked, and I'd examine it. Mm-hmm. And so that gave me some ideas. And the thing I saw was a lot of the equipment had a bar that was square to the world, so when it hit something, it was going to stop suddenly which is going to send the driver of the snow machine through the windshield. So that's.
And you want to avoid that?
I wanted to avoid that.
Okay.
So that was one of the few things that I invented was I tilted the that cutoff bar at an angle. So now when it hits something, it bounces over instead of snags. So that's
Nice.
So all my equipment's designed to bounce over obstacles because we got a lot of obstacles out in our trails, and it seems to work just fine. It still moves snow down the trail, and it's a big H shape, so it takes off the high points, drops the snow in the low points, and eventually things get nice and smooth, and we have our beautiful winter trails.
Yeah, we sure do. But now it's hard on the snow machines, though, isn't it? Because you got to go at a kind of a crawl.
It is. So I've got a Scandic that's got 2 speeds, and so I'm in the first gear most of the time when I'm grooming, and it's held up pretty well. But I plan on buying a new machine every 10 years or so. It's probably about as long as you can expect them to last. So.
Well, given your rich involvement with a number of communities, last year you decided to start your own nonprofit. And tell me about Fairbanks Trails Incorporated. Is it modeled on another organization?
Yes, it's modeled after Trail Mix down in Juneau. I don't know if anybody knows about Trail Mix, but they're an organization that maintains and builds and advocates for trails in the Juneau area. And Sitka has a similar organization. And statewide, we have Alaska Trails. And so we kind of modeled after those other organizations as a 501c3. And it kind of came about because I wanted to donate my RMDs. That a lot of us have IRAs that blew up through the years. And then you have these RMDs, you have to pay taxes on them. So that rather than pay taxes on it, I want to give my RMDs to organizations. And it was difficult to find a trail organization that would take the money. So I made my own organization and gave it to myself. And so far, IRS has not complained. So,
So do you ever argue with yourself as an employee? Yeah. I'd like to be a part of those board meetings and see how those go.
Let's go.
Yeah, but it's no.
And my secretary over there, I'm Dan's partner.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about dance in a minute, but I want to move into sort of a competitive side. And doing that, how did you get involved running the ski-a-thon for years?
It was all Susan Todd's idea. That she was very involved with trails at the university, and one thing she decided was we should revive the ski-a-thon, and a lot of you already know that the ski-a-thon used to go around the entire 12-mile trail, but as soon as there were a dozen road crossings, it was just impossible to put on that race. You needed a huge manpower to have people at all those road crossings and stuff. So that was the demise. I mean, Joan Foote put on the original ski-a-thon, and she was the director probably 10 or 15 years. But it had fallen off the radar, and so I went at it, and I found a course all on UAF land. So it was just on by looping around, and it could use all the and still got a 20 kilometer, about 12 miles. Course out of it, and started putting on those races, and 22 years.
To do that, Stan, it's not like getting on a snow machine. You got to get other people to register the skiers that come in, hand out the bibs, have people mark the trails.
Well, I kept it really, really simple, so we could do it with like 3 people, 3 or 4 people. It was all it would take to run it. One of my timers is back there, and the new race director, I think she's back there somewhere too. So that I have retired from the ski-a-thon, and Laura Grage is going to be the new director.
Well, I thought your approach during COVID was kind of an interesting take on it. So there you sort of let people go out whenever,
right,
and just on a honor system.
Right.
Tell us what
Yep.
they ski.
Yep, send me your time, and we put out the results. So.
Yeah. And you got those nifty little patches that you...
Right.
Are those based on the original patches?
Yes,
or?
they're the same as the original patches.
Wow. So
from,
real collector's item.
Collector's items, yeah.
Okay, then there's this other event I've heard, the Equinox Marathon.
Yeah.
And I have to ask you about it because you have the distinction of being the fastest person on that course for over 30 years. And but is it true that the first time you entered as a walker?
Yes, this was right after my college years at the University of Colorado. I'd never signed myself up for a race, so I knew nothing about race registration. Coach always did that. As I get up here and I hear about this Equinox Marathon, and so I show up for the day of the race thinking I was just going to register. And they say, nope, you can't register as a runner, but we'll let you register as a walker. Because they had these two divisions back then where you had the walkers and the runners. And so I registered as a walker and ended up, I was actually in like second place for a while, but I totally blew up at the end. But I still ended up in fourth place as a walker.
But we're talking overall race. You were the fourth, yeah.
Right.
As a walker, that's a fast walker. So just to, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about that, the conditions on the day that you set that record pace.
Yeah, I heard our interview on KYC
Yeah.
that talked about that.
I can't play that here.
Can't
though.
play it here,
Yeah.
but it was an unusual event. As one, Patrick Cross had set the record the year before, and he was a missionary for Yukon, superb half miler is what his specialty was in college. Had incredible foot speed, had never run on trails. And so he shows up, and Audun Enstad was doing part of the course. So it was Patrick Cross and Audun Enstad and I just tearing along the trails and going, wow, this feels really fast, we're pounding along. But every time he'd get on trails, Patrick would be gone. He didn't know how to run on trails, and so up hills or something, he'd just be off the back. But as soon as we get on asphalt, which there's a lot, the Equinox has a lot of asphalt, there he'd be again, he'd just like, he'd be right with us again, I said, boy, this guy's really fast. And so, of course, the last part of the race has a lot of asphalt in it. And Audun had dropped out because Audun was never going to hurt himself before ski season. So I think that's the reason that Audun didn't have the record for a number of years. And that's true of a lot of the best athletes in town are cross-country skiers, and they're not going to hurt themselves in that close to ski season. So I think that protected the record some. So, but anyway, I couldn't keep up with Patrick Cross, so he got the record. So the very next year, the course was in very good condition because it froze. It had been very wet. The leaves were all down, and those leaves were stuck to the ground, and everything froze rock hard. And since I got around it in 2 hours and 41 minutes and 30 seconds, the course was still frozen when I got to the finish. And so there was no mud, there was no traction issues, all the puddles were frozen. And so I was able to get that record. And I held it mostly through obscurity, because in the lower 48, there's a lot of superb runners, but they're either road runners or they're trail runners. And of course, the skiathon is half road and half trail. So it just doesn't attract a big international crowd or anything. It's just all us locals that run the thing. So
yeah, and you were number one for a number of years. So, okay, but I want to touch on two other sports before we get to your passion now of dancing and who you dance with. But in high school, was it that you decided to enter a bike race because you were also biking? It was your first bike race that you entered, and you won it.
Well, not quite true, but
Not quite true? Oh, yeah. So tell me, what happened then?
Well, I needed to train in the summer because I was on the team, so I needed some kind of training, and so I started bike racing. You know, I found this Schwinn Paramount, this short time where Schwinn was actually making racing bikes. And so I bought this racing bike and I started entering all these races, and I could not keep up with them. You know, I really, because I was new to the sport, you know. But what I found is that once you were going uphill, and then, I can keep up with these guys then, you know. I mean, because they'd shift down. And this bike I got just happened to not have very many low gears, you know. So I'd just stand up and push, you know, and they'd be gone. And so there was this Mount Evans hill climb that they put on every year. And first time I entered that race, I won, you know, because I was acclimated as well, because I would be going to 14,000 feet on weekends to go, so I was well acclimated, cardiovascularly fit, and so I won Mount Evans hill climb.
Yeah.
So.
And the other thing is, you told me, is that when you came to Alaska, because waterways are so critical here, you took up boating and you kayaked. Tell me about that kayak trip.
So when we got up here, I still had all my bikes, but you quickly realize there's limited places you can go on a bicycle in Alaska, you know. And so I switched to rivers, you know, and I started buying boats from these Kleppers were around. And so I got a single Klepper and a double Klepper, and I got a little whitewater kayak, and just kind of learning, and met some other boaters that were all they were much better boaters than I was. So they'd take me down to the Nenana, and I'd flip over. They'd drag me to shore, put me back in my boat, and to go a ways further. And so finally I decided I've got to get a raft. You know, I'm not fit for kayaking in whitewater was just scaring me to death. So I bought this big whitewater raft, and Jane Heinman, I'd follow her down through the rapids, and I got really good at getting my raft through and keeping it right side up. So. And
then tell me about Sitka.
Yeah, the two of us were actually going to do this trip from Sitka, from Haines to Sitka in our single Kleppers, and like 2 weeks out, and my partner bails on me, and so I wasn't going to not go. So I went down to Haines and took out off through the straits, and I wanted to meet this friend of mine that fished on the outer coast. So I went on the outside of Jacobi Island. So you're basically in the Gulf of Alaska, paddling along. The water's getting rougher and rougher, and I knew that, and I didn't have a GPS or anything, and so I was kind of getting a little strung out about how I was going to find this Deer Harbor, you know, which is this little harbor that the fishermen would go in. And I was going along, and here comes this fishing boat across in front of me, and it goes in somewhere. So I'm going to follow him. So I went back in there and set up camp and went and met these fishermen and stuff. My friend never came in with his fishing boat. And so every day I'd try and leave, you know, and I'd get out, and it's like, I'd turn around and go back. So about the third day, it was finally calm enough that I was able to get on down and get back into an inside passage and get out of the Gulf of Alaska, and pulled into Sitka and took the ferry home. So
amazing. Okay, now you have a passion now that doesn't deal with the natural world. No. It's dancing.
Yes.
Tell me about how you discovered dancing.
Well, my parents were dancers.
Were they?
My first memory of dancing was standing on my mother's shoes and learning the box step waltz. And they mostly do square dancing. But, and then through grade school, I did a talent contest doing the Irish jig in 6th grade, and I won. So, and then in college, I was a square dancer. We had the Calico and Boots Square Dance Club in Boulder, Colorado. And it was kind of these two parts of the club. There was this very straight-laced kind of part. And then there were all of us hippies that had decided we were going to square dance. And we all square danced together and had a great time together, you know. It was great fun. And then after that, I just kept dancing. When we got to Fairbanks, I found the Ballroom Dance Club of Fairbanks. And
Had you done ballroom?
you know, some swing dancing. I'd learned a little swing dancing here and there. So I started taking all of their classes, and then they needed dance assistants. There'd be too many follows, and so they'd need more leads. And so I'd go down there and ended up taking some of those classes like 4 times, 5 times, you know, just over and over again. And eventually I got on the board, and Barb got on the board, and we basically ran the ballroom club for 10 years between the two of us. She was president and I was secretary.
That's great. And so you've named a number of dances. Do you have a favorite?
Well, the swing dances are generally my favorite, but there's a cross-step waltz that I really like, that we've traveled some to workshops that are cross-step waltz oriented.
There's even a video of you demonstrating that. Is that
right? Yeah, Judy Creeth taught like at least 8 weeks, probably, maybe more, maybe 12 weeks, probably his 12-week class of cross-step waltz. And Judy and I would dissect this video that Richard Powers put out there. And it's kind of the Bible of cross-step waltz. And we dissect these moves, and then we go and teach it to the students. They go back to the video and find some more, teach it to the students. And then at the end of this whole series, Don Turner, who's passed away now, said, we got to do a video. And so Jan Vernay agreed to be the follow, and I was the lead. And then Don Turner was on the mic, so we just love still being able to hear Don Turner's voice. You know, he's got this real gravelly voice, and was just it's classic. And it's got 6,000 views or something.
Yeah.
YouTube hasn't paid me a dime, but
That's right. That's right. And Hollywood hasn't come down.
No.
Like, what is that? So, do you teach as well as it sounds like you also teach it?
Right. We've been teaching Ollie classes in dance, and we're going to teach waltz for 8 weeks this fall. So come learn to waltz.
Okay. So, and are there competitive dances that you enter with Barb?
One time we did, but we have this little local competition that happens every year.
Yeah.
And so we'd jump in that just to support it. As a board, we kind of said to ourselves, look, if we're going to prove this thing, we got to show up. And Roland Jensen was the one that really loved to put on these competitions. But it was low key, you know, it wasn't anything like the world dance competitions, you know, nothing like that. So
All I remember as a boy is they shoot horses, don't they? And not an upbeat movie about competitive dancing there. Yeah. Okay, what's ahead for you, Stan? You've got so many projects. You've got dancing. You've got Fairbanks Trails Incorporated. So what's ahead?
Oh, getting old.
Getting old. I'm with you, brother.
Yeah, we hope to have interns again next summer. We had 2 interns that
for your Fairbanks Trails.
Fairbanks Trails.
How do you find interns?
Well, I made a donation to the Student Conservation Association. There's a guy in Palmer that kind of runs a lot of the SCA activities in the state, and he happens to be from Saltia. So he was the one that tracked me down and said, you know, maybe we should work together. And so I said, oh, now this sounds like, because I've been, for a long time, as I got older and older, it was harder and harder to do the work. And so the thought of having youngers doing the work was very appealing. And so I worked with them, and I got 2 interns, one from Ohio and one from Colorado. And they were the first 2 we interviewed, and we hired both of them. And out of nowhere, and they were great, you know. I mean, they had just such great attitude, and Gavin in particular was just really good on the chainsaw. I mean, he was kind of a free range kid from a small town, and he'd take his dad's chainsaw out and saw stuff up in the woods, you know, as a kid. So he was just, you know, he was really good in the chainsaw.
Did you point him to the Himalaya Trail and say, you know, you could put an extra one in there?
An extra one in here, but yeah, it was an amazing summer. But I kind of assumed that I'd send them out and give them some instructions, and then I'd go home. And it never seemed to work that well. You know, I mean, they are just 19. You know, and I'm not a very good supervisor to give them the full details up front. You know, so there'd always be questions, and so I ended up just working with them all summer. So, which was great. We just got more done because I was out there chopping brush and helping bench too. So
yeah.
We benched like 1/3 of a mile of the Scarland Trail. That if you ever get on the Scarland, it was amazing how fast those guys could cut those routes and bench that trail.
Wow. But when you do that, are you imparting, I mean, when you have an intern like this, because Stan, obviously you have a passion for the natural world and having access, providing access. Do your interns allow you to do they share that, or do you try to instill that?
Well, I tried to teach them whatever I could about it, and I also would introduce them to some other people. I had plans to take them around to BLM and some other places so they could just to kind of show them other people that had made it an avocation, you know. So I did find some. They worked for a week up at Birch Hill, and Tad, their new executive director up there, a young guy. So they were able to interface with him, and then with Seth Adams, they were able to meet Seth and another young guy that's all involved with trails. So it was. I think they had a good experience and got a lot of exercise.
Yeah,
a lot of bug bites.
Sounds like it, yeah. And finally, are there projects that you will be targeting in the coming years?
Well, I do want to put a trail out to Muskrat Ponds, but it's been tough to get approval for that. So I'm not sure I'll ever get approval for it. But that's one I'd like to do. But other than that, it's just the Chinook Conservation Park will continue to need work, and that's this land that IALT, the land trust, obtained the place where the drain, because when Esther was using the giants to wash the overburden down, the creek channel was too windy for them. They needed a straight shot to get the mud to the Chena. So they just dug this straight drain, abandoned the creek bed, and ran the mud down the drain. And IALT and Fish and Game was involved, and these different agencies were involved. At the same time, the DOT was reworking the Chena Ridge Road, and so this project came together to put the creek back in the creek bed and dry up the drain. And then they obtained that parcel there that has both of those, and are putting trails in there. It's just going to be an amazing park. You know, they put these bridges across so you can connect these trails up, and so I'm just excited about doing more work in that park. We put all these bollers in because the place was overrun by four-wheelers, and so and wheelers can go by on Chena Pump and on the section line on the other side of the property. They really don't need to go through this property, so it's probably going to be a battle to get them out of there. But we're going around every time they find a new place in. We plant railroad ties, and that's why I need these young kids, because railroad ties are hard to move around when you're 76. So.
Well, and I just want to thank you. I mean, as a skier, as a hiker, all the years that you've been working on these trails is really remarkable. And about this time every night, I open it up for comments from the audience.
Well, I want to thank you, and I think everybody should thank him.
Oh.
Can you believe this guy does this program and all he's done?
I'll slip you that 50 when we're done. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any memories?
I've got a question.
A question.
And you talked about the Himalaya Trail, but you didn't talk about Himalaya, living there.
Oh, we missed my 2 years in the Peace Corps in Nepal. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
that
tell
was
me about that.
Another that I joined the Peace Corps. Just kind of. I'd been working for DEC a couple years and decided to take a sabbatical, and they let me do it. And I went and built water systems, gravity water systems in Nepal for 2 years with the Peace Corps.
What part of Nepal?
I was kind of all over, and I mostly watched birds, but it was like I got sent out east to the Solokhumbu area to survey this crazy project that never got built. But I went and watched birds, and it was mostly in the far west, in Jumla area, is where my main focus was. And I had some projects to the west of there, and I had a project right in Jumla where there were some younger people that had to do this service project, and they came in and they knew how to turn the wheels, and suddenly we had pipe and people, and we built this water system right in Juneau, the first piped water that had ever been in Juneau. So.
That's remarkable.
And they're strictly transport. There was no water treatment. We just try and find clean water and pipe it to town. UNICEF provided this black plastic pipe, and then they'd get this Indian plumbing metal parts, and they'd get bags of cement, which we would then combine with aggregate to make concrete and cement. I'll get those terms confused, but cement and then mixed with aggregate makes concrete. So.
Yeah, boy, another exhausting project though, hefting those cement. Yeah, blocks around. Any other questions or memories or experiences?
Not being a hiker, you used a term that I'm not familiar with. What do you mean when you say they bench the trail?
Oh, benching is when it's the side hill on. You're going down this trail, and the trail is slanted down to the side, and there's some things that happen, which once I tell you this, you will see it all the time, is that when you've got a natural trail that you don't cut a bench, the trail will go downhill, and then it'll come up and barely pass a tree. It'll go back downhill, barely past the next tree, and you'll see it everywhere that the trail crosses a side hill, unless you bench it. And benching is you make it flat. And the way you do that is you go along the top edge and you cut the roots and you move that material down to the low edge and to make a flat bench.
Mm. There's a question?
That culvert by Chena Pump, that's Cripple Creek, right?
Right, Cripple Creek.
You didn't mention that. And,
Yeah.
And sooner or later, people can start to enjoy our local place names. And John, you said Troth Yid accurately. And when I walked that Himalaya Trail, and I didn't know anything about the history of it at all. And I'd gone back a few ways. There's that coulee there that wraps around. It's a double lookout. And in 1981, Matthew Titus told me there's some kind of lookout around there somewhere.
Oh.
And so that's Troth Yid the Nachkat.
Oh, wow.
So that's an authentic place name. Just put two and two together. And that should be figured into the master plan.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah. And that's all.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Are many of your trails recorded precise enough to download the tracks to my GPS so I can follow them?
Some of them are. That's happening more and more, where they're geo-referenced, and there's lots of different trail apps that people have on their phone, and I'm kind of pathetic with my phone, so I don't make tracks with mine, but it's becoming more common that there are the ones you can use with your phone to find your way around.
Not phone so much, maybe phone. I'm not a phone guy either, I'm too deaf.
Yeah.
If the track I could download with my GPS, I could just follow summer and winter and know that I'm off and on.
Well, the one thing to look at is Strava, Strava, and it uses athletes that want to record their track from their phone and their times. They have these competitions where they just compete with each other on different days. They're just using their phone on timing. But I think Strava also uses people that haven't turned off their GPS chip, and they're just always wandering around leaving breadcrumbs. Because you look on there, and where the golf course had no trails on it before, and now the loops I groom in the golf course are clearly defined on Strava.
It's probably golfers, don't you think?
No, the golfers their tracks don't show on. It's all skiers, you know.
Interesting.
Maybe.
Yeah, recording it, I'm sure.
You mentioned 4 Acre?
Right, yeah. That was, I've been up to Denali once in 9/8, so almost, like 7/8. I tried to go up the Muldrow route, and we got just below Denali Pass, and Carol Shea got pulmonary edema going on, and I wasn't doing well either, so we descended. And a few years later, I went back and did the Muldrow route, the West Buttress, and climbed it. But then I also did 4 Acre, which was the greatest climb because you've got access. You land at the main strip where all the Denali climbers land, and then you go the opposite direction. You know, so you just leave the crowds, and sure you hear some planes occasionally for a while, but you go up over Mount Crossan, and you follow this ridge, and then you climb 4 Acre. And my brother and I and Phil Lee, we made the summit, and it was a great climb.
I saw a hand back there. Don.
So yes, why don't you tell us a little bit about the origin of the pooch loops and the walking trails in UAA, and what precipitated that?
Yes,
Okay, so Don's asking about the pooch
loops
on the
yes,
New Wave
the
trails.
pooch loops. That was the vision of Dana Mowdrey, was the person that started putting those in. And eventually there was this incident where we had a chancellor, I forget his name, but he took people walking on the ski trail and said, let's go on the ski trail and see if we can get yelled at. And they were walking on the ski trail. And that precipitated this whole process to kind of...
I think we burned him at the stake.
I think so. But this whole process of sharing North Campus, because before it was skiers only, there was nothing else for walkers or anything out there. And the compromise was that these pooch loops would be in one area, and the other side was supposed to be dog-free, but there'd be some walking trails through there. And it's worked fairly well, you know. It has just kind of separated the uses and worked well, and they're well used. So.
Well, and this is a point we didn't talk to, but I just want to raise it, is that putting in trails is managing people as much as nature. I mean, you have to build coalitions or inform and get people together.
Right, yeah.
And it seems like that's a large part of what you have to do.
Yep, there's a lot of... The Trail Advisory Commission is meeting tonight, you know, and they used to meet monthly, but now they just meet once a quarter. And the borough is getting more involved with trails. They have the Trails Challenge, and
Yeah,
so there's a lot happening.
there sure is. Well, I don't see any, Bill.
Yeah, excuse me. He has more talent. For instance, we air conditioned the Northern Center
So,
from scratch, and we didn't know anything about it when we started, did this thing.
right, we went and met with experts that kind of told us what we needed to do, and we went at it. We bought this air heat exchanger. It's not actually air conditioning, but it just exchanges air and tries to keep a hold of as much heat as it can. But it turns out that building had this 2-foot. It was actually 2 buildings. It was the old portion and the new building. And when they built the new building, there was this place where the form had blown out, so it was all the cement. So they just built the new building 2 feet away from the old building, and then scabbed them together, you know. So here's this duct, you know, this place that goes all the way through the building to run our ductwork through, you know. And so we were able to get the ductwork to, you know, just most of that building. And that building used to have water just weeping down the windows and the ice all along the bottoms of all the windows. And so we turned that thing on, and it just within a week or two, and all that ice was gone. It just dried up that building, and was just very successful. And it's still running today. The motor burned out after like 10 years or something, but I got a new motor, and it's back running. So
Yeah. And the center, you said they're soon to pay off their mortgage? And
I think they're getting close to having that mortgage paid off.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
they're
exciting.
one of the few environmental organizations that owns their own buildings.
Yeah. Well, any last takers? Well, help me in thanking Stan Justice, and you can talk to him afterwards.